As I said already, the recording starts and I keep fumbling again and again. As I said earlier, I recorded the whole course with the first edition, and then the second edition came out just in 2023, I think. So I'm trying to map the old book into new book with chapters and appropriate additions of new things that I think are important enough. This is something we covered partially about planetary boundaries, and this has been separated into a chapter 4, Our Boundaries for Sustainability. I'll read the introduction and show one figure from the updated planetary boundary figure by Rockstrom et al. Our current sustainability challenges have not gone unnoticed. As we saw in the previous chapter, they have attracted increasing attention among decision makers for over half a century. However, the attention has yet to transform into substantial concrete action to address the challenges at hand and ensure that our solutions do not generate new ones that would undermine the ability of future generations to meet their needs. This is the original Brundtland Conference statements about what sustainability means. And this is similar to fossil fuels that we have been dealing with, where we have made life better in many ways, but we have worsened the human environment system in many ways, as we already saw with the impacts chapter. The scientific community has been trying to describe our sustainability challenges and suggests ways to address them, at least since the Enlightenment. For instance, Thomas Malthus describes the challenge of population growth already at the end of the 18th century, when suggesting that the power of population is indefinitely greater than the power in the earth to produce subsistence for man, or the first scientific proof of the greenhouse effect by Svante Arrhenius a century later. Just have to be careful that Malthusian disaster, catastrophe, whatever, never happened, because Green Revolution came along. So the book Population Bomb, written by Paul Ehrlich and I think by his wife, predicted grave danger, disaster, but Green Revolution came and continues to support population growth, even though we are reaching peak population for a different reason. So we have to be careful about how to interpret Malthusian ideas. However, decision makers have so far either not understood the gravity of the problems, or at least prioritized other and often short-term political and or economic gains over the sustainability of humankind. To motivate decision makers to prioritize the vital over the valuable, the scientific community has realized that it is not enough just to describe sustainability challenges and explain their causes and effects in relative terms. It may be more motivating to also communicate absolute boundaries over which there would be cataclysmic consequences for human life and societies. So, while the international community has become increasingly concerned about the current and anticipated state of the world, the scientific community has not only endeavored to inform the global dialogue with the knowledge about the challenges per se, but also with the estimation of such boundaries. This is all very nice, but if you go and look at my podcasts on IPCC assessment report summaries and many articles I've written in the media about the problems with the projections, including the estimations of such boundaries, is that for the first couple of decades, the model uncertainties, internal variability of the system, of our Earth system, determine how the trajectories of future evolution of climate and planetary boundaries look like. But beyond that, the uncertainties are entirely dependent on the scenarios that we assume. And if you look at all the geopolitical perturbations, the Hamas-Israel conflict, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, COVID-19 pandemic, and so on, future is quite uncertain, so we have to be careful about that. So this information we are getting from the IPCC and the climate community in general, the scientific community in general, about the future has to be taken, considered carefully. How to make decisions about those for mitigation versus adaptation. There are lots of problems. Nonetheless, Planetary Boundaries for Sustainability 2022 update. Note, chemical pollution here is called novel entities. So here we have climate change, space, safe operating space. You have to be careful how it is defined, and always remember this is a global mean, and also remember that how to convert these into actions is not always clear when you aggregate over the global scale. For example, you have biospheric integrity here, and there is other things not yet quantified, and you have land system change. These are aggregations of very local changes, and how to deal with them is not always clear. So you have increasing risks on this side. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading. I think I need cataract operation or something. So stratospheric ozone is still within the safe operating space. Atmospheric aerosol loading not yet quantified. Ocean acidification is within the planetary operating space, safe operating space, and so is freshwater use. But if you look locally, then freshwater use is quite stressed. Physical, economical, and political access to water is kind of quite disparately distributed across the world, and you have water quality, quantity, and access also as issues. So keep all those things in mind. This has become a very catchy figure to be discussed and used, but what is the practical use is quite debated as well. So a few more words. The social foundation for sustainability. The planetary boundaries set an environmental ceiling for our development. However, policies aimed at ensuring we stay within them may, if poorly designed, hinder the development of the poor and disadvantaged. With this insight, Raworth 2012 suggests complementing the planetary boundaries with social boundaries to ensure no one's development is held back. So equity, justice, and all those good things. Such social boundaries act as foundation for building a sustainable society concerning sufficient food security, adequate water and sanitation, education, and so on. So am I showing that figure here? No, actually let me make sure what I am not showing. I think we already looked at it. This is the problem of doing things on the fly. Actually, it's easier to look here. Sorry, I'm going to do this in real time and perturb our flow. Yes, we looked at this before. It's the safe and just space for humanity. The number was different, but it was basically from Rockstrom et al. 2009b and was redefined by Oxfam with 11 dimensions of social foundations that included social foundations covering food, water, income, education, resilience, voice, and so on. And of course, outside we had climate change, freshwater use, nitrogen, phosphorus, and so on. Sorry about that. So going forward, our world cannot be considered sustainable with up to 811 people. Our world cannot be considered sustainable with up to 811 million people facing hunger in 2020. So this is later data from the previous version. 161 million more than the year before, mainly due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic swiftly destroying years of development, which I just mentioned in terms of what to expect for the future scenarios based on projections. Even if the global nutritional status of children has improved, it is not acceptable that 22% of all children under 5 years old are so malnourished that they are stunted in their growth. Again, more recent data from FAO at 2021. Especially not when it is increasingly evident that malnutrition is not only causing illness and death, but is also impending cognitive development, causing irreversible learning disabilities for children and reducing work capacity and productivity. So morbidity is very important, and labor productivity losses are critical as well. Similarly, the world cannot be considered sustainable with 25% of the global population still not having access to safely managed drinking water, which I just mentioned in the context of freshwater use being within the safe operating space. So this includes 5% consuming water from unprotected wells or springs during springs, and 1.6% directly from a river, stream, lake, pond, dam, or irrigation canal. This is from WHO and UNICEF 2021, so after the first edition. That is 122 million people drinking untreated surface water, or the same population as 12 Sweden's. It is even worse concerning sanitation, with 46% still not having access to safely managed sanitation services, including 8% using open pit latrines, hanging latrines, or bucket latrines, and more than 6% practicing open defecation. That is 494 million people still disposing of their feces openly in fields, forests, open bodies of water, beaches, or other places, with all that entails for health and security, air quality, water quality, soil health, and so on. Only China and India have larger population than these numbers, corresponding to 10 Colombias or Spains, or 100 Irelands, and the Central African Republic practicing open defecation. So the number is depressingly large. Concluding, we are increasingly grasping the dire current state of the world. We are also becoming more and more capable of anticipating a range of future states depending on what courses of action we put into practice from now on. Earth system scientists provide convincing input to decision makers concerning critical planetary boundaries, monitor how we fare in relation to them, and become increasingly good at communicating the results to policymakers and the public. Yet, there are few signs of any significant change of direction, especially not concerning the consumption and voting patterns of the citizens of liberal democracies who contribute the most to our sustainability challenges through their own consumption and by not using their voting power to put politicians in place who are ready to prioritize sustainability over short-term political and economic gains. We have the power to change the direction but seem collectively incapacitated to do so. This is a bit naive because people do vote on causes and concerns, but politicians are then dealing with lobbyists with a lot of money, and they can happily ignore what the people voted for, and then people have to make decisions in the next election cycle based on either other issues or just accept that politicians are not going to be effective in addressing their concerns. In short, it does not look good. While we have been making steady progress concerning several social boundaries, recent pandemics and conflicts have proven how fragile hard-earned development can be for the poorest and the most disadvantaged. Moreover, the lion's share of the increasing stress humankind places on our planet is not related to also allowing them to live within fundamental social boundaries, but instead to the seemingly ever-increasing consumption of the people who already have it all. In other words, the rich minority continue to do most of the damages in the planetary boundaries, so combining with the social boundaries in that sense is very critical. I believe the economist Jeffrey Sachs is correct in an interview concerning our sustainability challenges. If you are not scared, you are not well informed. Okay, but again, the caveat is that people who are well informed also see themselves as invincible or as not being affected directly or being creating winners and losers. So these are more complicated than saying if you're not scared, you're not well informed, because well informed people can practice rational ignorance and just ignore the dangers. We have painted ourselves into a corner, and getting out means many uncomfortable steps and a lot of repainting to make it right. The first thing is, however, to realize that we have our backs against the wall and that we need to stop painting the same way we have been doing for so far too long. It is clear that although nobody on the planet seems to be against sustainable development, few grasp the scale of the transformation it entails, and few are actually willing to sacrifice everything they have to for things that don't necessarily just benefit them, or may not benefit them at all, but may mostly benefit the others, the poor, the women and children and so on. That, so there are many details involved, and it's not as simple as saying if we are well informed, then we'll be heading towards sustainable development, or that we'll be voting correctly and so on. Okay, so let's leave this chapter. As I said, this is addition to what I had already recorded, so I'm going to only keep it to one podcast for this chapter, but other details are already there in the original chapter 3. Okay, so let's meet in the next podcast.